Morning, everyone. Welcome to the ESCoE Conference on Economic Measurement 2026. I'm James Benford, Director General for Surveys and Economic Statistics at the ONS, and it's our pleasure to partner with ESCoE on this event and to have you all here. Thank you all for the efforts that you've made to be here. Some seasonal patterns can vary, but tube strikes, or at least the threat of them, have the feel of a pretty regular pattern in the summer months in London. I know many of you have travelled from overseas too, so thanks for your commitment to what is a very good cause. We have 450 people registered this week, representing nearly 200 organisations, a quarter of which are from beyond the UK. I thought I'd tell you a bit about the building. So welcome also to Bush House. The building you are in was conceived in the roaring 1920s and finished a decade later, and was touted at various points as the most expensive building in the world. Irving Bush poured his fortune into it, intending to create a grand international trade centre to connect the world's commerce. His timing was a bit off. The building was finished in the mid-1930s and was actually a bit of a spectacular commercial failure and a victim of the Great Depression. And it sat empty for a number of years. But what really makes this building resonate is what happened next. What rescued Bush House wasn't a better business plan. It was in fact the BBC, who moved in here in 1940 and gave the building the resonance it has today. The BBC World Service broadcast from here for over 7 decades, reaching hundreds of millions of people around the world, and doing so by building and maintaining a reputation as a trusted information source, something I'll come back to. The building is now occupied by King's College London, home to the Economic Statistics Centre of Excellence, or ESCoE, and seems a very fitting home for today's discussion when the question of building and maintaining trust in economic statistics feels like the topic du jour. ESCoE will have its 10th birthday next year. Your presence here today, together with the packed and, I'm sure you'll agree, very exciting agenda is a real testament for what they've achieved over that time. I've visited and spoken with many National Statistics Offices since joining at the ONS last summer, and I've been really struck by just how many have mentioned ESCoE and the important role it plays in the global statistical community. So, if you have any ideas on how we can help Rebecca Riley and ESCoE more broadly celebrate their 10th birthday next year, then let me know. I'm in the market for them. I wanted to pick up on that theme, though, of trust in my opening remarks. Trust is central to the business of producing economic statistics and the value they cover and convey. For example, the US NBER recently estimated that undermining trust in the integrity of the Bureau of Labour Statistics by raising economic uncertainty has reduced US GDP by around $20 billion, a multiple that is around 25 times that agency's budget. Trust is connected to much of what we will discuss in the coming days. There are, I think, at least 4 dimensions. First, statistics themselves are only a reflection of the source data they summarise. Access to quality data rests on the ability of National Statistical Offices to act as trusted data stewards, not just internally keeping that data safe, but looking after the data system as a whole, which is increasingly broad and complex. Second, there is a question of trust in the quality of statistical outputs. Demands for the quality of outputs are higher than ever, and so, though, is the demand for quantity, for greater depth, frequency, and breadth of statistics, bringing with it a tricky but unavoidable trade-off to manage. Third, in a rapidly changing world, particularly when we have new technologies like AI, there's a need for there to be trust that our system of measurement remains relevant to the modern economy. And fourth, there's a much broader question about trust in the organisations themselves that are producing statistics. Is there trust in what they say? Is there trust in what they say they are going to do? The approach to communications and engagement is at the heart of this, and as I'll discuss, I think is a place where the old methods no longer work. So first then, trust in stewards, trust in source data. People and businesses have to trust National Statistics Institutes to give us their data, reducing their burden of participating in surveys, respecting people's time, being clear about why we're asking, what we will use that data for, reassuring that data will be kept safe, is not an administrative detail, it's foundational to what we do. All National Statistics Institutes are facing the same global challenge, one of declining response rates. A longer running trend has been the growing competition for attention and a need, therefore, to modernise the mode of surveys to align with preferences for shorter online interactions. Institutional setups, of course, differ. Some, like the ONS in the UK, like to encourage response by rewarding people with vouchers for participating in our surveys. Others, in fact many others, like to discourage non-response by penalising it. But underneath those different institutional setups, the problem is the same: how to build trust and understanding around the value of participating in those surveys. Part, but only part of the solution, I think, is diversification, complementing surveys with alternative data sources. That brings its own challenges, not least the need for new methods to incorporate outputs from processes that were not designed to produce statistics. I'm sure we'll pick up on that point in a number of the technical sessions in the coming days. But the need to match economic concepts directly, the need for a timely read on what is going on right now, and to understand beliefs and intentions means we always have surveys. And so making our systems of surveys work in challenging and changing times is a necessity. In André Loranger's opening remarks, he will explain Statistics Canada's Gather, Guard, Grow and Give framework, a model that treats the data life cycle as a relationship of stewardship and builds on this theme of trust as data stewards. Second, there's a question about trust in the quality of outputs. Challenges with the representativeness and the quality of source data are, of course, reflected in the statistical outputs that we produce using them. The incorporation of third-party data sources brings with it new and different exposures to quality risks. And, at least for a period, many NSIs, National Statistics Institutes, have struggled with the expanded demand for the breadth and depth of real-time data that followed the pandemic, stretching us too thin. At the ONS, we made a strategic call over the last year to prioritise quality over quantity. This year, we will cut our statistical outputs by 10%, consolidating what we're doing on health, subnational statistics, crime statistics, and environmental statistics. That, I think, is a necessity. It's what users are asking us to do. It follows steps last year to step back from analysis that is not necessary to produce quality statistics. It's helped us to put more resources into producing economic statistics and the surveys that underpin them. And that overriding focus on quality is beginning to pay dividends. Over the past year, we've restored the sample size for our labour force survey to the pre-COVID point. We've implemented all the design changes for its replacement, the transformed labour force survey. We have brought supermarket scanner data into consumer prices and reinstated and strengthened our producer price statistics. Our GDP figures now align with administrative estimates of R&D in the economy and incorporate factory-less goods production for the pharmaceutical sector. Last month, the UK was recognised by the International Monetary Fund as meeting their top tier of statistical standards, SDDS+. There is, of course, a long way to go, and you'll have the chance to grill me on all of that at a panel session we'll have on Thursday, together with the Office for Statistics Regulation and ESCoE. Those types, though, of prioritisation calls, trading quantity for quality, I think are only a first step, and I'm not sure they're sustainable. Ultimately, we need to be able to do more with less to produce quality statistics at the breadth that people are asking for. That, I think, is the opportunity that, in the new technologies we're seeing on AI and automation to enhance the capabilities in the productions of statistics. and it's one that many national statistics institutes need to respond to, given the pressure on budgets in today's tight public sector environment. Professor Michael McMahon's Day 2 plenary will explore what new technologies and techniques such as machine learning have to offer. He'll remind us, though, that the expansion of data and tools can only offer the promise of more if one still remains grounded in what data can and cannot tell you. Third, a slower burn, but just, I think, as existential challenge is relevance. Many in this room will have played an important role in building the new system of standardised classifications, standards for national accounts, and for the balance of payments that the global statistical system is now gearing up to implement. The changes will update our classifications, introduce new methods to deal with, for example, the role of data as a critical asset in the economy. In the UK, like many NSIs, we are working to implement those new standards by 2030 and bring in the core elements that are material to GDP by then. It's really important, though, to acknowledge that the methods to implement these new concepts are themselves still being operationalised, tested and developed. They're not set yet, and I'm not sure they're complete yet. As we work things through, we will need to recognise the challenges that automation and artificial intelligence pose to those traditional methods. For example, fully capturing investments in data requires one to understand what machines are doing alongside labour, and that's something that needs to be looked into more depth. More broadly, though, we should be humble, I think, and open that the new standards that we agreed last year on SLA 25 and BPM 7 could not possibly have anticipated all facets of the revolution we are now seeing in the use of artificial intelligence. It's not just software developers now that write software. Many across the whole economy can with the latest tools that are on offer. Indeed, software can write its own software. So we need to think about what that means for how we measure investments in software in the economy. Many AI tools are open source and provided free for use, so long as their user is open to their data being collated and captured. Carol Corrado's keynote on Thursday will address this topic and look at how national accounts need to evolve in the age of AI. He'll lay out the challenges of measuring production in a world of digital and multinational firms, intangible assets, and AI-generated consumer services. We'll also have a panel discussion today covering the perspective of national statistics institutes on these measurement challenges and how they're incorporating AI in the production of statistics and how it's changing the business of disseminating them. Finally, there's the issue of trust in institutions themselves, in the organisations that are producing statistics, in what they say and in what they do. It is sometimes said that all we can do is to make the statistics themselves of sufficiently high quality, high relevance, and independence to be trustworthy. Though that is, of course, a necessity, I'm not sure it's sufficient. There's little value to be had in statistics that are trustworthy but not trusted. The way that national statistics institutes communicate and engage, and the way that the broader debate around economic statistics is conducted, are critical determinants of trust. At the ONS, we have changed our approach to communication over the past year. We're being more open by publishing our plans to improve economic statistics and publishing regular updates so you can see our progress and judge us for it. We're being more candid about the trade-offs we face, what's possible and what's not. We are shooting for realism over ambition and are introducing a waiting room to bring that to life so you can see clearly what's being held back. We're also changing the tone of our communications to bring in more humility. We're explaining where things have gone wrong, why and what we're doing about it. And we're emphasising where there's uncertainty in our releases and the judgments that one can infer and the one that one cannot. There are some signs, I think, that these steps are beginning to improve the quality of the conversation around economic statistics. A high-quality debate is, I believe, really, really essential to building and maintaining trust around economic statistics, there is perhaps a bit further to go, at least in the UK, in improving that debate. The business of producing statistics is fundamentally a collective endeavour, a team sport. Statistics work best when there is a strong collaboration between producers, between users and researchers, and public discourse is, I think, at its most effective when there is a shared understanding of the challenges that individual actors in that system face, challenges constructive and focused on how the system can improve and move forward. ESCoE itself has, of course, made a really important contribution to that debate already, and the conference that I've organised with you today will, I'm sure, take the conversation a step further. Sorry. So to conclude, I'll return to where I started off by reminding you of the building that you're in today. Irving Bush built this place to connect people and ideas across borders. It was the place where for 70 years the BBC World Service was built up to become the largest and most trusted news service in the world. That success rested on building and nurturing trust with its sources, the quality and relevance in its outputs, and engagement with its users. Exactly the same dimensions that the global statistical system needs to engage with and build trust in today's times. I'd like to thank particularly ESCoE and to our host Kings today for organising what is a fantastic lineup and everything they've done already to improve economic statistics. Please all enjoy the conference, which comes, I think, at a really critical and important time for our global system of economic measurement. Let's work together to progress the debate further and set up our economic statistics to rise to today's challenges and seize today's opportunities. Thank you very much for your attention.
Good morning, everyone. My name's Liz McKeown. I'm Director of Economic Statistics at ONS and have been delighted to be one of the co-chairs of the Scientific Committee at this year's ESCoE conference alongside my good colleagues Paul Shea and Stephen Hansen. As James so clearly articulated, this is a really great annual opportunity for people like us who work in National Statistical Institutes to engage with the broader academic community. And when we thought about this conference and thought about how we could articulate some of the issues and opportunities, the challenges that National Statistical Institutes were facing in these times, I could think of no one better to invite to review that landscape than André Loranger, who is Chief Statistician of Statistics Canada and has been so since December 2024. He brings nearly 3 decades of experience at Statistics Canada, is a hugely influential voice in official statistics across the globe, and we're really looking forward to hearing how the world looks from your perspective, André. So I'm going to hand over to André. He's going to present to us, and then there'll be a good opportunity for questions after that. So, André, thank you.
So good morning, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, James. Thanks, you colleagues from the international statistical community and researchers. As I was listening to James, I was thinking whenever I present behind somebody who from the ONS, I'm always tempted to say ditto. Because there's so many similarities between the statistical organizations, and in fact, all of what NSOs are living. Certainly, I think you'll see a lot of parallels in my presentation with what James just articulated. The demand for data has never been, higher, and while trust, resources, and traditional approaches are under pressure. NSOs operate at a level of heightened expectations and scrutiny, and in some cases a lot of scrutiny. At the same time, the technological landscape is changing. It's evolving at unprecedented speed, which is a great source of disruption for National Statistics Offices. However, it can also be an opportunity. So national statistics organizations need to adapt without compromising trust. There's that word again. Quality and independence. Oops, I went too far. There we go. The basis of my talk today is an HLG Moss paper that reported on the future of official statistics. Now, those of you who aren't familiar with the international statistical lingo, HLG Moss is a UN group that stands for High Level Group on Modernization of Official Statistics. So last year, a paper was published on the future of national statistics offices, and it was a call to action. What do statistical organizations need to do to sort of move forward? It analyzed the history and the role of NSOs, the challenges and opportunities that they face in an era, again, of technical and technological and social change. There were several contributors in this paper. The UK ONS was actually the main editor of this paper. My own organization, Statistics Canada, participated as well. So I'm framing my conversation sort of as with this paper as a stepping off point in terms of what we're doing. Now, Liz mentioned that I've been working in official statistics for roughly 30 years. Started my career at StatScan in the late 90s. Basically spent the first 15 years of my career sort of building GDP estimates and so on. Moved on to prices and so on, became sort of head of economic statistics. I suppose the role that James is in now, but in StatScan, and now I find myself chief statistician. In those 30 years, I've had numerous conversations with many stakeholders. And I can summarize all those conversations in 4 words. And I see my colleague from StatScan, Jennifer, there. She'll probably laugh because she hears me say this all the time. But bigger, better, faster. And recently there's been a lot of emphasis on cheaper. I think James said those words in maybe a bit differently. I like to think of it in terms of granularity, integrated data, timely data, and of course cost effective. And those expectations persist whether or not there are fiscal constraints. It's always about more data. The demand for data never goes down. It's always sort of going up. And those pressures are structural. They're not cyclical. Although certainly business cycles and sort of the resources that governments have certainly affect the resources that we have. But those pressures are always there. So, as national statistics organizations, we require solutions. And in my view, it's a matter of survival. My talk today is also influenced quite a bit by the fundamental principles of official statistics. These principles are sort of these principles are the core of how official statistics should behave. I'm not going to go through them all there, but if you do, look at some of them, you'll see that a lot of the things that James talked about in his introductory remarks, relevance, impartiality, standards, cooperation, those are all sort of principles that all national statistics offices should sort of aspire to. It's been endorsed by the UN General Assembly, and I think it's a really elegant way to frame the work that we do. When I started as chief statistician at Statistics Canada, I put a lot of emphasis on the fundamental principles of official statistics and further integrating the principles in our daily operations. So we're always thinking about these principles in the back of our mind. And again, sort of, this is what underpins trust, ethics, and quality. And as we transform and modernize NSOs, we do need to think about how we align with statistical values that are espoused in the FPOS. There we go. James referenced Statistics Canada's Gather, Guard, Grow, Give. And it's all a coincidence, by the way. James and I didn't sort of plan sort of our talks. But my talk is also structured along sort of the data life cycle. So what we do in terms of collection, what we do in terms of processing, how we communicate to stakeholders. So the Gather, Guard, Grow, Give is really our simplification of, again, I'll use another acronym, the GSBPM. Who's familiar with the GSBPM? Okay. Many aren't. It's the Generic Statistical Business Process Model. And again, it's a UN convention that basically talks about how statistical organizations do their work. And you see a representation there. Sort of at the bottom of the slide is really our really high-level elements of the GSBPM. And at the top we have the way we like to simplify things at Statistics Canada in terms of our 4G model. So we gather data, we guard it, we protect it, ensure that it's accessible only by people who should have access to it. We keep it private. We grow the value of data, and we produce statistics and insights based on the data that we collect. And we give it back to users in terms of the dissemination. So gather, guard, grow, give. Very simple way to think about our business. So the remainder of my presentation follows this structure. So if we go into guard, or gather, I should say, the first thing that I want to articulate sort of challenges, and here I'm going back to the paper on the future of official statistics. It's a really interesting paper, and I suggest you all read it. But one of the first challenges that the paper mentions is the falling response rates. As we see, and this is common to all national statistics organizations, it's harder and harder to reach respondents. So response rates are falling. Respondents are harder to reach. I don't know what it's like in the UK, but in Canada, very few people have landlines. You used to be able to telephone them at home while they were having dinner and get your LFS response rate. It's harder to do that now. They all have mobile phones, and most people don't interact by telephone anymore, to be honest. Trusted institutions is declining. When we do phone, there's a lot of issues related to credibility. How do I know that you're StatsCan calling? Why should I respond to you? You're just the government. Those kind of that kind of thinking. Response burden as well impacts response rates. So there's such thing as response burden fatigue. Like people get surveys after surveys after surveys. Some surveys from Statistics Canada, some surveys from other sort of public opinion research firms and so on. It's hard to differentiate sort of between them. So there's this overburden in terms of response rates. So all these things contribute to falling response rates. Now the key thing here is that if we're trying to produce quality statistics, we need strong response burden or strong response rates. Quality depends on participation, and then it's a bit of a cycle because participation depends on trust, relevance, and also burden. Mandatory surveys help, but they are not a completely sustainable solution. So you'll see on this graph here that the top line is our labor force survey. In the mid-90s, we were around 96% response rates for our LFS. Now we're mid 70%, despite the fact that the survey is mandatory. But if you compare the mandatory survey versus a collection of other social surveys that we have on the chart, you'll see that there's a big gap. So mandatory does matter. So as we think about sort of what is the answer to this, so mandatory might be a solution, but the shift to administrative and alternate data sources is also very important. So there are a broad range of data gathering approaches that national statistics offices use. from survey approaches to alternate data, and I suppose in the middle of that are bespoke collection models. So traditional surveys are still important. Some information is really difficult to obtain, and quite honestly, you can only obtain them from surveys. There's a lot of things that you will never get from an administrative data file, particularly questions related to sentiment, for example. Like, you need to survey for that. But the solution is not abandoning surveys completely, but it's complementing them. We at StatScan, like many other organizations, have bespoke collection models for large and critical enterprises. I'll talk about that a little bit later. Large case units, for example, that collect all of the information from really large firms. So in the next few slides, I'll touch on why it's important to, why different populations and different units need different approaches, and how diversification helps resiliency and efficiency in statistics. Our comparative advantage as national statistics organizations is that we sit on petabytes of data, and we have the skills and abilities to link and integrate these sources to provide more insights than siloed solutions can. So, and this, in my view, is our superpower. We're really focused on data integration in my organization. With respect to collection, we think quite a bit these days about sustainable collection through more modern survey methods. Collection is really costly, and at StatScan now we're really trying to think about how we can make our collection more sustainable. We refer to this as intelligent survey design, where we try to maintain quality and minimize bias by focusing on smaller samples with more adaptive follow-up, calibration, and integration of external data to sort of, again, minimize bias and enhance quality. And key elements of that include person-level sampling as opposed to dwelling-based. The results are better when you can target individuals. Subsampling for non-response follow-up. So this is the idea that if you follow up significantly on your non-response component and follow up until you get some response, you get a really good idea of the characteristics of the non-response, which impacts your ability to adjust for bias. And of course, strategic use of alternate data to calibrate the various results that we get from surveys. I'll perhaps take the opportunity to plug another HLG Moss paper that was released last week. This paper was called Advanced Survey Cost Effectiveness with Non-Response Treatment. Statistics Canada took the lead in terms of this paper, but it's also an international contribution, and it focuses on techniques such as subsampling for non-response follow-up, weighting adjustments, multimode methods, and cognitive tests, and utilizing auxiliary data to mitigate for non-response bias, as I've just said. So it's a really interesting paper that sort of digs down into the weeds a little bit in terms of those methods, and has a lot of use cases in the paper. I'll go back to our labor response survey. As I mentioned previously, our response rates now have fallen about 20% since the mid-90s, and we're really interested in getting them back up. So we are using a lot of the methods I just talked about to bring our response rates to above 80%, and this is why we're calling the project Beyond 80. The strategy involves using behavioral insights, a lot of paradata, live experimentation to raise response rates. So we are now pushing for online first rather than a visit from an interviewer. In previous waves of the LFS, you would get the survey in your first month of collection when you're in sample. We're now, we have a month zero initiative where we actually reach out to the respondent the month before they're introduced in the survey, explain to them what it's all about, what their responsibilities are, how to respond, and we found that really, really works well. We're We're using adaptive survey design, so we actually look now at where our responses are coming from, where we have non-response, and we alter our collection efforts to make sure that we have good response rates across the sample. We do targeted follow-up, and we do a lot of point public opinion research on what people know about the LFS, what people know about how the LFS is used in the economy, why is it such an important indicator, and so on, and that's having a lot of impact too. It's difficult to see how successful the project is and all these initiatives are, however, because there's always things that affect the response rates on the other dimension. For example, as we're introducing some of these measures, we had a postal strike. So if you can't mail out, you can't reach your respondents. So it's up, it's down, but generally I think we're seeing an upward trend. But the bottom line, I think, is that there is a direct link between the response rates and the amounts of effort and the amounts of money you spend on collection. But at some point, you can follow up. There are diminishing marginal returns, and you need to sort of cut it off. And that's really important as well to think about. Next slide is related to, again, these large case units that I talked about. In Canada, we have about 230 enterprise groups that account for 46% of exported goods, 42% of employment, 28% of total corporate value added, and 27% of corporate revenues. Less than 0.1% of Canadian businesses account for sort of those numbers I just laid out. So very, very important firms in the Canadian economy. They're few in number, but their economic weight is huge, and it demands a specialized approach. So we have a concierge-style management approach, I guess, where we have an enterprise portfolio management concept where specific people are assigned to the portfolio of firms, and they're the main contact, and sort of we basically get the data from them in any way that we can. Sometimes we help them fill out their surveys. Sometimes we just get these massive data dumps of all their information. But the point is that it's a specialized relationship between the enterprise portfolio manager and the firm. And whenever we have questions about the firm operations and so on, we're always going through those individuals. And it really helps us as well in terms of updating our business register, because these firms are huge. They have large structures. We need to understand the structures to make sure that we place their activity in the right industries and so on. And we use these enterprise portfolio managers to do profiling of the structures of the firms as well. Very important role to be playing. Mentioned administrative data sources. In StatsCan, I suppose the largest, and I suppose here in the UK at the ONS and other national statistics offices too, we have tax data, which is probably the most mature source of administrative data. In Canada, there's a strong legal foundation between the tax data and official statistics. The acts sort of work together and sort of allows sort of us to sort of get all of the tax microdata in our systems. It's really a powerful administrative data asset, and we use it extensively across the system. We use it for and particularly I'm going to talk here about the corporate business data, but also the personal data. On the corporate side, we use it to replace cells in all our surveys are basically income statements. So we have income statements from tax, so we can use it to replace certain values at the firm level when they're missing. We can use them to replace whole strata. So in Canada, we have a lot of small businesses, and if the small business is under a threshold of revenue, I think it's 30,000 now, or maybe 35,000. We don't survey them at all. Like, you're forbidden from surveying those guys. So, but we just use the tax data directly. In some cases, we have annual business surveys that feed our national accounts. With budget pressures, we've realized that we don't need to do those surveys every year. In the odd year, we can replace the entire survey with tax data, and that's what we do. As well, in our national accounts, sometimes we use all kinds of tax data to anchor the various estimates. Early in my career, when I was building SUT tables, we were basically building SUT tables from the microdata, and a lot of the microdata was tax data. So it was super large use of tax data. An interesting initiative that we're doing as well with respect to collection is our Ag Zero initiative. Zero meaning no response burden at all. So this is a reaction to the fact that our farm operators are always complaining about response burden, particularly because we send surveys at the time when they're really busy planting and so on. So we said, well, what can we do with administrative data? And we developed this Ag Zero concept where we're basically, wherever we can find an administrative data site, an administrative data set, we incorporate it in. And some examples include satellite imagery for crop yield surveys. We've actually replaced iterations of surveys with just satellite imagery and modeling. At first, there was a lot of pushback, and how can you actually do this? And we found that the satellite numbers are more accurate than what the farmers were telling us in some cases. We're using online market data, Kijiji, Facebook Marketplace, for hay price estimates, if you can believe it or not. The Canadian Pork Council has a pig trace program, which sort of they identify all the pigs are tagged and they follow it through. So we're using that data in terms of our livestock estimates, and we're using organic certification data obtained from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency to sort of produce estimates on organic crops. Scanner data in official statistics. Scanner data, certainly for prices, is super important. It improves accuracy, timeliness, coverage, granularity. It allows us to do things that we couldn't do before, build superlative indexes. I think it improves as well our ways to quality adjust. I don't know if Erwin Dewert's in the room. Yesterday we were talking about multilateral indexes. There he is. And sort of that's what sort of the scanner data allows you, is to build multilateral indexes, which I think are more accurate than sort of the traditional ways that CPIs were collected. In Canada as well, we're using this data to produce of course, we've all gone through large inflationary periods in our countries, in the UK, in Canada, elsewhere. Food prices was a big deal in Canada, sort of a lot of discussions in Parliament related to food prices. Our reaction to that was to create a food price hub that sort of highlighted the various movements in food prices. And the scanner data allowed us to build some very detailed average price tables. Average prices aren't the same as inflation and indexes, and sort of that confuses people, and so we were able to put that out, and I think it was really useful. So I'll summarize quickly, and I think I'll have to accelerate if we're not going to blow the whole agenda for the day. But in terms of gather, response rates are declining. We need diversified data collections to really move forward. Modern surveys methods that focus on sustainability, smarter sampling, and so on. We need targeted strategies to improve collection, like the labor force survey, and certainly administrative data is a big help to accompany the survey data. So we'll go to GARD. The next issue that I want to talk about is trust in the currency of official statistics. Trust is, I think I went too far. So trust and data privacy. Privacy is really interesting. Stakeholders, our citizens in Canada, depend on us to keep their data safe, and demand that sort of they're really concerned about sort of getting the. They're really concerned about sort of how we deal with their data. We also have questions about, well, doesn't the government already have this data? At the same time that their whole lives are exposed on Facebook. I find it very, very peculiar. But anyways, we need to sort of make sure that, that they trust what we do with their data. Obtaining data obviously is has a big impact on data quality, and the quality of the data also impacts the trust of the organization. I think James mentioned that in his slides. So it is a bit of a cycle. And at the same time, sort of there's erosion of trust in institutions, so it is a big issue for statistical organizations. So as we think about trust, I like to think of trust as the currency of official statistics. Without trust, we really can't do anything, and it is a bit of a cycle. If we don't have the trust of respondents, we can't build quality statistics. If we can't build quality statistics, users don't trust the data, and sort of it's a vicious cycle. So how do we build trust? Well, I'm going to go through the next few slides thinking about telling you about how we at StatsCan build trust. The first thing is we build a lot of frameworks in our organization that force us to think about how to build trust. For example, as we think about how to use AI and machine learning, we've built frameworks that govern our use of AI, that really bring ethics and the fundamental principles of official statistics into the mix, focusing on transparency, fairness, accountability, privacy, security, robustness, and of course rigor, because we are a statistical organization. We put strong emphasis on governance, human oversight, explainability, and accountability. These are non-negotiable for official statistics as we move forward. Now, on governance, ethical considerations for us always play a fundamental, a prominent way of thinking in terms of all our data collection. So when we embark on a new data collection, we've got this framework now that we put our analysts through in terms of, okay, well, what is this collection sort of really sound? Is it how are our privacy considerations addressed? How are legal considerations addressed? Is it ethical to collect this data? We have to ask ourselves that. And then we've built in concepts that are, if some of you are privacy experts in the room, the concepts from the privacy world on necessity and proportionality. Before we go out and do a particular collection, we want to make sure that the necessity is really demonstrated. So clearly demonstrate the benefit to the public of collecting this information. And proportionality, so that we only acquire the data that's necessary to actually achieve what we want to achieve. I think in the past we would try to sort of just gather up all the data, usually microdata, because we thought, oh, will you be able to use this? That doesn't resonate with folks from the privacy lens. So we've developed this framework, and we're enhancing it all the time, and I think it's been really successful in terms of sort of helping us build trust with our constituency. Trust is built actively, not passively. So we've created a trust center. So this is a part of our website that talks about everything that we do. All the data collections, if we're going to go out with a new survey, like we actually announce it ahead of time. We talk about the content. In that process, there's time built to get feedback from the respondents. The key features is that everything that we do related to our releases is on the Trust Center. Transparency on data collection, data use. It's a two-way engagement with Canadians, and it makes our governance visible. So quickly again, on GUARD, we've got rising concerns related to privacy, cybersecurity risks, increasing public sensitivity. We're trying to operate in a world where we hear about data breaches all the time. at the same time that we're trying to collect very sensitive information. So we need to be very public with respect to how we show trust. We need to be responsible in terms of our AI use and our governance, and this is achieved through frameworks that we sort of built and use. And again, trust is actively built through ethics, transparency, engagement, and of course, as I said, rigorous governance processes. So how do we grow the data? I'll go through a few examples here that address the challenge of staying relevant. So again, James in his talk talked a lot about sort of relevance and how to meet user needs. Again, this is about sort of the bigger, better, faster, cheaper way of thinking about things. And all that is really about relevance. Making sure that we can present data when the data is needed, when decisions are being made. So the examples I'm going to show you today are really about how we're integrating data. So there's all kinds of data. There's survey data. There's admin data. So I'll highlight a few projects that I think were really novel at the time they were created as creative ways of using administrative data. The first one is our Canadian Housing Statistics Program. At around 2018, 2017, there was a lot of housing inflation in Canada. A lot of it, we suspected, came from institutional investors overseas, buying up condos, driving up prices, but we didn't really know. Our Department of Finance came to us and said, well, can you do a survey on this? Can you get some information? And we thought about it for a bit, and we said, well, a survey is probably not the best approach. What we need is to build a database of residential houses and identify who owns the houses. So we set out to build this massive administrative data program that looked at assessment roles, municipal assessment roll, land registry data, and so on. And we built basically a register of dwellings in Canada. And then we were able to link it with the tax data, with the census data, and so on, to identify who owns the homes and actually get the answer to that question that we were asked at Finance in terms of what is the extent of foreign ownership in the Canadian housing market. And that program is still going on, and it allows us to provide very granular data on housing. I'll talk about trade a little bit. Of course, when we think about trade, we think about imports and exports. In Canada, we also produce a program that we call our Trade by Importer and Exporter Characteristics, our TIC and TEC. So the TIC and TEC is basically taking the trade data, linking it to the information that we have on the firms that are actually importing and exporting, and we can produce a lot of different characteristics on the firms. We can look at their sector by activity, we can look at their location, we can look at their employment size, we can look at how prevalent importer and exporters are in the Canadian economy, we can look at market concentration, ownership status, and so on. The slide here just shows the change in trade from 24 to 25 by country. And we're easily able to say from this data that the trend is less trade with the U.S., more trade sort of elsewhere. On the next slide, we look at trade diversification by firm size, which is also very interesting to sort of look at. We have a multinational enterprises in Canada program. This is basically an extension of our foreign direct investment data program, which measures intercompany investment. There's two dimensions, of course, inward and outward. And again, these are just extensions of the foreign direct investment program and sort of additional linkages, mainly to our business register and other information that we have. Variables include assets, liabilities, operating revenues, and all the other economic statistics that you would think about. On the outward side, it's kind of the same thing. We use techniques and extract and integrate publicly available information into variables that we already have to produce a nice picture of multinationals operating in Canada, and Canadian multinationals operating outside of Canada. This is, I think, my favorite slide of the deck, and I think this is really the future of some of the work that we're doing. So we're now able to combine granular socioeconomic data with geospatial information, and we're producing economic data at the 1 kilometer grid square. So this answers the question of bigger, better, faster. Well, certainly the bigger and better part. I'm not sure about faster because there's still a lot of research to be done there, but it allows us to answer very important policy questions, questions about rural versus urban economies, the impacts of floods and wildfires on specific communities, issues related to property crime at a very local level, issues related to transportation and impact on the economy. So what you see on this slide here is the Canadian GDP at 1 kilometer square resolution. So the cities stand out as the really bright spots on the chart. So doing some ongoing research, we're trying to do a little bit more modeling on climate risk, infrastructure use, regional investments, and how to develop city-level indicators. And as we think about this kind of work, I think it is really promising, but there's also other issues, particularly the privacy issue. Because then when you start looking at city-level information, there's a confidentiality issue that comes up. Yesterday we had a roundtable. We talked a lot about AI. AI is all people talk about, and rightfully so. So at Statistics Canada, we've done a lot of thought about how we are measuring AI, and we've started to build a program that we call our Tech Stats program. It's really about it's really a measurement framework to measure technology adoption and its impact. The program has 5 basic components, so measuring business technology adoption and use, technology adoption and use by Canadians, so not by businesses, but by individuals, AI use in the workplace, and of course federal government technology and AI adoption. It's a combination of survey, administrative data as we move forward, and the focus is really on looking at all of this activity from a foresight perspective, looking at what's coming in the future. Adoption, obviously, how are these technologies being adopted? And of course, impact. What is the impact on productivity? What is the impact on GDP, on economic activity, and so on? We're just in the early stages of this. We got funding for it just in the last budget. So we're going to be developing this program as we go forward. Distributional household economic accounts. This is a new feature in the SNA 2025. We've been doing that for a number of years in Canada. I believe we were the first to publish quarterly DHEAs. Again, the idea here is that aggregates hide inequality, and disaggregating really sort of gives you a different picture and a different distributional impacts. And this is increasingly what policymakers want to see. So lower income households, our data can show that that they were negatively impacted by declining interest rates and self-employment income. Net savings on the period that's shown here worsened for middle income households, mainly due to weak wages. So the picture is very different when you look at income quintiles and so on. So this is another example of combining survey and administrative data to really sort of dig deeper into the issues. Business innovation and growth support. So again, at Statistics Canada, we have this linkage program that we called our link file environment. We basically have the ability to link all the tax and business microdata together. Then we work with government departments who have funding programs. So if our industry ministry has an innovation program and they want to know if it's working or not, they send us their program information, and we're able to link it with our link file environment and actually show all kinds of characteristics about does the funding actually work? Does it help? Is it effective? How do firms perform when they get funding versus how do firms perform when they don't, and so on. And we keep growing this environment, but there's a really huge potential for doing impact analysis of government expenditures. So we can talk about growth and how we use the data and all these fancy new ideas, but in the end we need to grow sustainably. Again, the demands keep increasing while capacity and budgets are constrained and are often shrinking. Trade-offs are unavoidable, and statisticians are really struck between a rock and a hard place. So that's the typical sort of national statistician there. So we constantly need to be revisiting priorities. We need to be stopping less useful and impactful work in order to achieve long-term sustainability. And certainly we've done a lot of thinking at Statistics Canada recently on this, largely because we're in the midst of implementing a 15% reduction in our organization, sort of as we're reducing the size of the federal public service in Canada. So we recognize that we needed to create some fiscal space. We needed to reprioritize existing expenditures, improve program efficiency. We looked at everything that we do, not just statistical programs, but also corporate services and so on. My initial idea was tasking our organization to say, like, let's list everything that we do, and I want a ranked priority. And then when a cut comes, then you can just slice whatever's lower. That didn't work too well. It was complicated to do. But it got us going. And then we started thinking, okay, well, what happens if we get a 10% reduction? What happens if we get a 15% reduction? What happens if it's a 30% reduction? And when you look at those scenarios, you can quickly identify the most important statistics. And we were able to sort of arrive at some kind of consensus. So we built this prioritization framework. What's interesting here is that every statistic that we produce as NSOs is used by somebody. And so when people are asking you to cut budget, they're really asking you to trade off between stakeholders. And that's super hard to do. Nobody really helps us with that. Well, they don't, because every stakeholder has a voice, and it's just that some stakeholders have a stronger voice than others. But at any rate, we use this process to help us along in terms of our budget reductions that we're implementing now. But the idea is to sort of evergreen that process. And whether you're in a growth scenario or whether you're in a stable scenario, you should always be revisiting your priorities. And the idea of stopping what is less useful to fund what is more useful is an idea I think that we've certainly tried to adopt at Statistics Canada. So again, in terms of summary of GROW, integration, foresight, to me it all points to relevance. And as NSOs, we must meet the growing demand for data, for timely data, for granular data. But we need to do so really efficiently because there's very little money to do what everybody expects us to do. So we need to sort of think about prioritization all the time. I'll move on and I'll try to speed up. This is how we communicate to Canadians, to users. I think I went too far again. Okay. Yeah. At Statistics Canada, we have a multi-channel, user-centric dissemination across various platforms. Our main statistics are released through what we call our daily. The daily is something that we've had since 1932. It used to be done on paper, but now it's online. And every time we release a statistic, it goes through our daily. Is really popular with journalists and so on, and that's how we communicate mainly with users. We have a vehicle called StatScan Plus that allows us to tell more stories. It's written in a less statistical speak and more user-friendly way of communicating things. We do a lot of high-impact social media engagement. We do around 500 social media posts per month that generate a lot of outreach. 4.7 million monthly impressions. It's up 92% year over year. Like, really focusing on people that typically wouldn't look at the Daily and these other vehicles to get the message out that the official statistics exist. So again, it's this idea that we have a bunch of bespoke products that go from simple to a very wide range of products that allow us to communicate very differently with different stakeholders. Talk a little bit about enabling access. This is sort of our strategy and our governance and security controls around microdata access. It's guided by the 5 safes, so safe people, safe projects, safe settings, safe output, safe data. We provide access to microdata in various ways. We have a virtual data lab, we have a research data centers in universities, but it's all guided by this framework. And of course, there's more access the less sensitive the data is. We have this framework at Statistics Canada that we call it's basically our confidentiality score. So every data set that we have, we rate from a scale of 1 to 9. 9 being the most sort of super secure, sensitive data, and 1 being the least sensitive. And so we use that in combination with this framework to provide access to stakeholders. I want to emphasize a little bit about what we do on social media. Our social media is really a data-driven approach, and we aim to meet users where they are on the platforms that they're using. Turning official statistics into engagement and impact. We publish about 500 posts per month, and the communication strategies are really data-driven and customized by objective, platform, audience demographics, and so on. So when we know that there's certain events happening in the Canadian economy, we will sort of have some social media about it, and we'll link it to official statistics, and it's been really, really successful. It's targeted tactics, and again, sort of 4.7 million users per month. We've doubled our public interactions to 175,000 per month. And on this slide, you see some interesting ones. Taylor Swift was in Canada a few years ago. We actually saw the impact of Taylor Swift in the economy. We spoke about it in our CPI. There was a Swift effect on prices. That's what that infographic is in the middle. And again, sort of these are sort of really creative ways to sort of link social trends to statistics, and we found that it works really well. This is another interesting one. We launched our census on May 4th. And so on May the 4th, the census awakens, and complete your questionnaire, your household must, right? So, and I didn't use my Yoda voice for that, but you can get the picture. And again, so just really creative ways of communicating statistics. Here's another one that's another slide that's inspired by the movie Field of Dreams. If you build it, will they come? Or, the movie from Kevin Costner, The Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. So the idea here is that we build hundreds of different sort of customized products, infographics, various hubs. If you go to the StatsCan website, we've got a hub on international trade, we've got a hub on housing, and so on. And we're starting to wonder now, like, should we be building all these hubs? Because if you look at the numbers in this slide, monthly bot traffic is up 55%. So these are the AIs of the world combing our website. The increase has been so much that sometimes we think they're denial of service attacks, that they're cyber events, but they're not. They're just AI bots searching for data. But human traffic is down 30%. So individuals aren't coming to the websites anymore. They're getting their information through the AIs of the world. And it's the AI bots that are coming to the websites. So when we talk about AI readiness and so on, I think this is why we have to think about that. There's a lot of things that we can do, strong foundations. Those of you who are familiar with the SDMX model and so on, .stat certainly help. But for us, as we think about this now, we see that this is the biggest impact on dissemination since things became digital. And we really are starting to think about metadata, standards, interoperability, rather than bespoke models. We've had discussions about sort of where we should go in this space. Should we just be putting out data and forget about sort of the articles and the releases and so on? So I think that's a conversation that still needs to be had, but certainly it's top of mind in our organization, and I think in every other NSO. So in summary of the give part, we can think about communication and this idea that we want to communicate to different personas. It's very useful to have to think about how you deal with the power users, how you deal with the academics in terms of providing data access to microdata, and how you deal with the man on the street. And sort of, I think you need tailored strategies for all of these things. Now, I'll end. I've got 2-3 more slides. We're really thinking about the future and how we deliver into the future. Our goal at StatsCan is to deliver smarter, more connected and trusted insights for Canadians when it matters the most. And what this means for us is that data needs to be integrated, not isolated. We need to use existing data first and not build a survey approach by default. We need processes that are fast, that are automated, that are reliable, and not manual and bespoke. And that will result in analysts spending more time on high-value analysis rather than cleaning data, which we do a lot of. Access needs to be digital first in machine-readable formats, not static reports. It needs to be metadata-driven, enabling discoverability, integration, and interoperability. And it needs to ensure alignment both internally and internationally. Finally, our workforce needs to be skilled, multidisciplinary, adaptable to change. And the current state of our systems is that we have a really heavy manual process, reliant on surveys, siloed roles that simply aren't equipped for where the world is going. So to address that, we have a vision. We're calling it our StatsCan 2030 vision. And it really sets a unified way in terms of sort of how we will be delivering smarter, more connected, and more trusted insights into the future. It's an integrated admin data vision that focuses on automation, standardization of production, enabled by modern technology and a multidisciplinary, future-ready workforce. Our vision builds on recent investments and modern tools and a decade of modernization, such as cloud, migration to the cloud, Pathfinder projects like our housing project that I talked about earlier, and shifting the focus from experimentation from the last 5 years to scaling. We're putting a lot of emphasis now on, okay, this pilot project worked, we're scaling to sort of the rest of the organization. Modern IT, target enterprise architecture, a strong business architecture, linking the two through standards and governance. And we're thinking a lot about the skill sets that we're going to need, the people that work in the organization. What kind of skills are they going to need? Well, they're going to need subject matter skills, they're going to need technology skills, some methodology skills, obviously, analytical skills, data management. So the prototype of employee of the future will have all of these skills, I think, and that's what we're trying to build. I think inspired by what we see here in the UK, we're also thinking a lot in Canada about official statistics. In the UK, you have the Statistics Authority, you have the OSR, you actually define official statistics and certify them. We don't do that in Canada. And I think as we think about combating misuse and misinformation, and we want to deliver our message related to the importance of official statistics, I think it's important to define them. Our Canadian Statistics Advisory Council, which is a high-level panel, kind of a board that sort of oversees our work, encouraged us to sort of start looking at that. So we've talked to folks here in the UK and in other jurisdictions, and we're starting to put a framework together for actually doing that in Canada. Really early stages, but I think for me this is a place where we do need to focus. And lastly, another thing that we're thinking quite a bit about is a system of population and social statistics. There's a lot of work happening internationally on this. We have the system of national accounts for economic statistics. On the environment, we have the SIA framework. But there is no overall framework for population statistics. So working with international colleagues through the UN system, we're sort of building that. Really sort of trying to frame, to put a framework together that standardizes concepts, definitions, classifications across domains of time, places, relationships, and outcomes. And the idea is that when we have the three pillars, so to speak, I think we'll be able to move forward a little bit better in terms of well-being measurement and sort of that whole beyond GDP debate. So we're thinking quite a bit about that in Canada, and as we think about these frameworks, we're feeding into the international statistical system, and I think there's a lot of momentum building in this space. So in conclusion, I began my remarks talking about the future of NSO's paper, the call to action, and what NSOs were doing to address these challenges. I've listed some examples here from Statistics Canada, but I think it's fair to say that all national statistics organizations are doing similar things in this space. But I'd like to wrap up by reiterating a few key points about the NSOs of the future and what they will need. I think we'll need to be better data integrators. This is the first thing. So rather than just merely data collectors. We'll need to be privacy and confidentiality protectors. And again, this is fundamental in terms of ensuring trust. We'll need to be promoters of transparency, which is also critical for building trust. We'll need to be advocates of ethics and fairness, ensuring that data aligns with ethical standards. And linked to this is social acceptability. I think when we think about our framework that I talked about and the ethics around data collections and so on, we're always mindful of where society is at and is this going to be acceptable to go and sort of collect this information. We'll need to be data literacy educators. We have a big role to play there. And we'll need to develop user-centric approach and products that factor in AI and modern technology. And lastly, and probably the most important, is data quality assurers. So statistical rigor as a statistical organization is our bread and butter. No matter what we do, if we don't have that statistical rigor, we might as well put a padlock on the door. And sort of, so I think about that quite a bit. And I'll end there, and hopefully you enjoyed the talk.
There, and you said ditto at the beginning. I think a lot of it resonated from us in ONS as well as you spoke. I'm going to take the chair's privilege of asking a first question, but that gives the audience a chance to be formulating the questions in their mind. Within the grow part of your framework, I wonder if you could speak a bit more about that trade-off between growing your statistics to address new questions and addressing existing questions better. And within the sort of addressing existing questions better, I wondered what your views are on kind of what are the areas of economic statistics where measurement really needs to be addressed better now?
That's a really profound question. You can go in a lot of different ways. I like to think about those issues related to the government priorities of the day. So in Canada right now, housing is a big issue. So we do need better measurement of housing statistics. I talked about our Canadian Housing Statistics Framework, but we need to do a lot more in that space. Immigration is also a big issue. We have all kinds of sources of immigration data. Some come from the Policy Department, some come from Statistics Canada. But there are a lot of different gaps that we need to address, so we think about those. Of course, we also think about sort of the general economic context. Trade is a big issue these days. And so it's really about providing data products that meet the policy needs of the day. And to your other point, I think sort of the how do you what is it sort of getting into more detail, or is it sort of I think it's both. Again, the bigger, better, faster. It's catchy, but there's some truth to it. So when we start putting out GDP, years ago we put out a national GDP. In Canada, we're a confederation of provinces, and it was very important at some point to put out provincial GDP. So we put out provincial GDP. When we did that, then it was, oh, well, what about GDP of our municipal areas? So we put out GDP by municipal areas. And I showed earlier slides of GDP at the kilometer grid square. So it's always just pushing out what you can do with the data. At the same time, I think we need to be very insightful and sort of look at what's coming down the pipe in terms of what are social and economic issues that we're going to need to capture. Like AI is an important one, right? If we think about, well, what is the impact of AI? How do we measure the economic impact? What is the social impact? We hear a lot about negative impacts of people using social media and so on. So how do we actually measure that so that we can equip policymakers with the ability to make decisions and pass regulation or laws that help society? That's kind of how I look at that issue.
No, great. Thank you very much. Right, open to the floor. Can I take some questions? I'll take a bunch at a time, so thank you. Please wait for your microphone. And it would be great if you could say who you are and where your affiliation, if you have one. Thank you.
Thank you. Fascinating talk. Joe Grice, now at KCL and UCL, but formerly one of the directors at ONS. And the question that's in my mind is, during my 2 decades or so with official statistics, all of the movement was towards not just putting out the numbers, but actually telling the story that went with them, and actually the analysis as well as the production of the statistics. I think you made the point at one point that in the world of AI, that may no longer be the case, and that actually, rather than putting out lots of articles, maybe NSOs should simply be putting out data and then leave it to AI or other means to get the story told. I can see the case for that, but the question in my mind is, doesn't that leave a bit of a quality assurance gap, in the sense that if you can't actually tell the story that goes with the data you're putting out, it's a pretty good indication that there may be something wrong in the data in the first place. Just wondering if you have any thoughts on that.
So I'll take a couple of questions. So, gentleman there.
I'm Eric Bartelsman from the Free University in Amsterdam. I have a question kind of about the trust and the statistical process. And I guess I'd use the catchphrase, trust but verify. In the past, when you had these stovepipes, there was a very kind of well-documented process, and out came a statistic, and everyone, even though we couldn't replicate it, probably, I hope, you would be able to. But now with the newer systems, getting from different streams of data, different weighting schemes, et cetera, it looks rather complicated. And then you come with an output, and I'm wondering how you deal with replicability of the final output. I saw your slide on AI and the things you're worried about with AI, and I didn't see the word replicability. And when I use AI, that's my biggest worry to use it professionally, is how can I ever replicate that result that it came out with? And so I'm wondering how you're dealing with the replicability. For example, I saw you have a remote access facility for people to do custom tabulations. Could you use that users could essentially take your scripts and regenerate the output you make? You actually create the facility where people could trust and verify.
So hold those two questions, and we have one online, which is, can you say more about how users beyond government are engaged in the prioritization of Statistics Canada's work program? So we've got a couple of questions in the sort of dissemination space, and then how is that engagement with users working?
Okay, so remind me what the first question was.
First question was, how important is it for us to be telling the story?
Oh, yes. So I spoke in my talk about thinking about how we disseminate data into the future. And that came from a place where, if you look at our website, we have, again, as I said, sort of an international trade hub, a housing hub. We've created all these fancy visualizations that increasingly nobody looks at. So then the question becomes, should we invest in those? And is it worth investing in those? And this is where the idea of becoming data wholesalers comes from. However, your point about telling the story is a really important one. And I think we have a big role to play in the interpretation of our data, so we need to be really careful about sort of where we go with that. We haven't really made up our mind. It's just something that comes up quite a bit. You know, I recently saw, I talked a lot today about HLG Moss papers that are written. A while back, you know, there was a 200-page article that was published. A lot of hard work, blood, sweat, and tears went into it. A lot of national organizations participated in it, and somebody threw it into, I forget what tool they were using, but they summarized it in a placemat. That was excellent. And so here we are. Well, we actually had to put sort of the document together, but why should we invest in sort of the visualizations and so on when you can just turn to AI to do it? One thing that we do, though, with respect to AI is that, and we are sort of advancing our use of it internally. We're certainly, anything that can be automated, we're automating with AI. We're actually writing articles now, partly with AI. But we have disclaimers that, okay, this article was generated by AI, but it was verified by a human. And that's part of our framework. Like, everything that we do with respect to AI has a person involved. On the second question related to where I guess reproducing the results, I think that's very important. In terms of official statistics, you know, quality data has certainly has elements. You know, in Canada, we talk about relevance, accuracy, timeliness, and so on. Other statistical organizations have different ways of looking at that. But we think that's really important, and speaking to the quality of a particular statistic is very important. This is where it becomes challenging when you have AIs that sort of are putting stuff together, and that reproducibility is not there, the transparency is not there. And this is something I think that we have to worry about. In terms of our own work, we will ensure, and we do ensure, that the work is repeatable and transparent, because we publish all of our methods and sort of our ways of working. We're also, sort of as we move forward, moving to open code. Again, this is a bit tricky sometimes because of confidentiality issues, but nevertheless, this is where we're going, and we are being really open. And I think for me, as I think about sort of the evolution of statistics, this is increasingly a place where we have to educate people that a good data set and a good data source has these characteristics. And reproducibility is key. And so this is something that we think about quite a bit. And remind me of the last question.
And the last one was about how are you engaging with non-government?
Oh, yes, non-government. Absolutely. Of course, in terms of priority setting, we often look at the priorities of government. But in Canada, we have, again, a confederation. We have provincial governments as well, so we look at that sort of what they want. We have a network of consultative bodies as well. Our biggest consultation is our census consultation, where we consult with all facets of society on sort of, okay, what are the questions that we should be adding to our census and so on. Of course, government is part of that, but there's all kinds of other groups as well. We have various subject matter advisory committees too, where we bring in sort of experts in the fields and get sort of the different perspectives, whether they be from academia, industry groups, and so on. So much like I suspect what is happening here in the UK and in other countries, I think that's part of the work of official statistics, is to consult and make sure that you actually understand what the users of statistics need and want.
I thought it was noticeable in your vision for the future what this means for Canadians. Mm-hmm. Absolutely central to that.
No, absolutely. Yeah.
Great. Let's take some more questions. Sanjeev at the back.
Thank you, Liz. Sanjeev Mahajan from the Office for National Statistics in the UK. Thank you very much for a very insightful presentation there, André. Two questions. One is on the trust dimension. You talked about the framework and the such. Do you have an example whereby, according to your metrics, the trust was in decline, and what did you, as an organisation, do about it, and how you went about it? Okay. Because that, to me, is like the test of that mechanism. If there isn't one, you're doing really well. Yeah. And the second one is more profound. A lot of the activities you described were Canadian, national. But when we look at the M&Es and we look at the latest SNA and BPM, we've got chapters in there on globalisation and digitalisation. These M&Es are across the world, which makes the challenge of what does Canadian GDP or GNI actually mean? Do you have any views on how we can address that challenge? Maybe like a network of NSIs, sharing data, reconciling that data, and collecting it less from the businesses, therefore reducing the burden. Mm-hmm. Thank you. Otherwise, what does the national concept mean? Mm-hmm.
And we're edging to the end of the time for the session, so it's the last chance to ask a question. So if you've got one burn-in, put your hand up now. Yeah, lady there, thank you.
Hi, I'm Izzy Warner, and I'm a data scientist at MasterCard. You mentioned how surveys are going to continue to form quite a large part of your statistics. How do you balance the use of surveys with the increasing need for near or real-time data?
Great, thank you. I think that's a wrap, so
okay.
To you, André.
Your question on trust, Sanjeev, maybe I'll give you an example of how we came with that trust framework. So several years ago, we, in the hopes of improving a lot of our economic statistics, we embarked on a project to get financial transactions data directly from banks in Canada. Would have improved our CPI measures, would have improved our income measures and the GDP. There's a lot of potential there. We were well on our way in terms of sort of articulating what that project would look like, and somehow it got leaked to the press that we were doing this. And then it was a fait accompli. StatScan is after your banking data. And the organization took a really, really big hit from a trust perspective. We spent the better part of a year sort of in discussions with the Privacy Officer of Canada. And in the end, what was interesting is that, well, first of all, we never acquired that data because we had never started the project, but it almost destroyed the organization. So we started to think back and sort of how do we bring in these concepts to make sure that we don't go too far, and that we go at the speed of trust, and at the speed of social acceptability. So what I presented today was really sort of a reaction to that. And I think as an organization, we're much better positioned now in that space than we were. In fact, we've, over the course of that time, developed a really collaborative relationship with the Chief Privacy Officer in Canada. And we have a consultative relationship with them. We get their views and so on, and we're very transparent about that. So I don't necessarily have metrics about how we're doing, because that's really hard to do, but I think we're in a much better position now. On your questions on multinationals, you know, in a world without constraints, you know, as national statistics organizations, we would go to these large companies once and say, what are your operations throughout the world? We would get those, and then we would share them. But we do live in a world with constraints. The legislation is a big part of those constraints, sharing data across sort of geographic regions and so on in different countries. But nevertheless, I do think we need to do more. There's a lot of initiatives related to sort of data sharing. Now, in terms of data sharing, does that mean that that we actually need to share microdata? I don't think so. There's a lot of things that we can do. A lot of data products that we can put out to better understand this phenomena, extended supply use tables, for example. We can further mine the trade data, the examples that I showed today, the tick, the tech, the ownership. Those are all things that if we work together, I think we can certainly improve the situation. And I think there's a lot of things that we can do without actually sort of sharing the microdata. I personally, I think we can do more, but I've also seen sort of in the 30 years that I've been in this business that things have improved and we are doing better. So that's kind of how I would answer your question there. And to the last question about the trade-off between surveys and timeliness, I suppose that's the faster part of my bigger, better, faster. We always have to do things in more timely ways, but we need to realize that at least at Statistics Canada, our job is not forecasting. So yes, we can produce near-time estimates or close to. But we draw a fine line there between sort of forecasting and near time. Now, then you get into the trade-off about, well, how good is the quality of your near time estimate? And historically in Canada, our big users, particularly the users of economic statistics, have preferred less revisions. So that means taking a little bit more time to produce the estimate, but producing an estimate that's, you know, that can stand the test of time. Although even that's changing. So, but in my view, I think we can do both. We always have to strive to sort of improve and move the yardsticks. And I think we are. We have a lot of examples in Canada. Even advancing the CPI publication date 1 or 2 days is a big achievement. And certainly when we did that in Canada, I got a personal call from the Government of Bank Canada saying, thank you, this is so useful. So like little moves matter.
Thanks for it.
Yeah.
No, fantastic. Look, thank you, André, for getting off our conference at such a fantastic start. I think some of the themes we've discussed in this session are just going to resonate through the next few days. Particularly give a plug for the session this afternoon where we'll have a panel of NSIs talking about AI and how it impacts in our statistics, not just the measurement of them, but also the production of them, the dissemination of them. These are issues that we're really grappling with across NSIs at the moment. I know the dialogue that we have across different countries is hugely valuable given the challenges we all face. We can learn a lot from each other and learn a lot from your talk today. So hopefully everyone can join me in thanking André. Thank you.